the fourth meditation of Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy. In this segment on Introduction to Philosophy in my course, this is how God is no deceiver, and it's more about God to how he exists. But in the fifth meditation is where he kind of takes up the existence of God a second time. He says that God is no deceiver because the will to deceive is a sign of malice or weakness, and God, being supremely perfect, cannot have any such quality, and it's not current with God's perfection. And if God gave me, if God gave me infallible perception or judgment, how can I make mistakes? Mistakes are not even in the whole idea of supreme perfection. I'm somewhere between godly perfection and the lower levels of weakness. I'm sort of moving towards a goal. However, that in itself makes me very, very different from God. And God has to do with and he participates in nothingness, and that's kind of a point which one might try to argue the demise of God. But when the meditator makes mistakes, this was not from a faulty God. When I make mistakes, it's not because of a faulty God, but it's a result of my non-being. The more, God being supremely perfect doesn't have non-being in him, but he uses non-being that he does have to make a totally perfect world. And my mistakes, my malice, my weakness, and all my mistakes and my imperfections come from the fact of my non-being, and that I am a finite being, where God, being this infinite being, has no possibility of that. God is infinite and he's perfect. And why doesn't he create same such beings? Why doesn't he create beings like him? Why doesn't he make us infinite and perfect like he is? And then you have to look at the whole of God's being and the universe, where finite beings play important parts in imperfections. So where is the source of our errors? And that depends on the intellect and the will. So it's not really the intellect, though. The will is kind of where it comes from. And the will is the freedom of choice, and how we have a unlimited free of choice, even though what we choose could probably be wrong. And my will is just as good as God's, considering God's will as a whole. God's will is superior only in that God has supreme knowledge, where I don't have that. And the indifference of will comes from ignorance, where sometimes us people will have a indifference when it comes to when it comes to what we'll choose, but that comes from ignorance, because we don't have perfect knowledge. Will isn't the source of error. Judgment is the source of error. It leads to error, and it's subject to conjecture and uncertainty. And the judgment is about the ability to affirm or deny things. We can perceive, and that's not wrong or mistake, but it's what we do with it is what can lead to error. So if we suspend judgment to avoid error in cases of conjecture or uncertainty, judgment should rely on clear and distinct perception. So God is no deceiver. That's the whole point of this whole meditation. God is not the one who deceives us. Yes, it's possible of a demon doing that, but the source of error comes from us having a state of judgments about things. And we can avoid that by not having any judgment unless we have clear and distinct perceptions. So, again, let me know your thoughts. I'll be back with the fifth meditation in the next segment.